is updated once a month. This is through April. That's the most current data. It's all this data comes from the U.S. Census Department. So it'll show you a map of the U.S. and you can click on any one of those countries. You can click on any of those cities if you want. If you just click on one of the bubbles in the map there, if you will. Lily's helping me out here. So there's where we pick New Orleans. So New Orleans ranks number 9 for its trade with Canada, and it shows you that through April of 2016, this year, there's $3.4 billion of trade. It lists the imports, the exports, the surplus, the deficit, the change, and the dollar change. And if you click on read more there, and you can really get lost in this website if you don't watch yourself. If you click on more, then it goes to the page on New Orleans. And it'll show you how New Orleans trades with the world. And you can scroll down and it'll list the top countries that New Orleans trades with. Scroll down a little bit more, there you go. So there's China, Mexico, Canada, and so forth. And if you scroll down some more, and there's a story there that tells you about how New Orleans trades with the world. It'll list, if you keep going even more, it'll list the top exports from New Orleans, and below that are the top imports. If you click on the next tab, there's a list of all the airports and seaports around the country. So Port of Los Angeles ranks number 1. Some people are surprised, but there's a bridge in Laredo, Texas that ranks number 2 in the country for trade with the United States. Number 3 is JFK, number 4 is O'Hare, and so on. If you click on the next tab, you can look at list of top exports. So aircraft is the number 1 export, followed by gasoline, then motor vehicles. If you click on the next tab, which is imports, there is something interesting going on here. So motor vehicles are still the number 1 import in this country, but now cell phones are the second most valuable import into this country, and oil is number 3. Oil so far this year is down another 39%. The value of oil imported in this country is down another 39%. And we'll talk about that during the discussion as well, because there's really some potentially game-changing, you can call it game-changing, call it destabilizing, whatever you want to call it, but it's a big deal that what's going on in the energy world. If you click on the next tab, we have a whole other set of pages that do have some of that tonnage data, so I'm finally getting back to your question. So I chose Port of Houston for a reason. In the upper left-hand side, it shows that it ranks number 7 by value among all the nation's airports, seaports, and border crossings. There's roughly 475 of those. It ranks number 1 by tonnage because it's a seaport. Now what's really interesting is if you look at the values in dollar year to date are down 27%. The tonnage is up. So what's going on there? Again, it's just commodity pricing is what's happening. If you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see that on the export side, their exports are down 21% in value, and that's going to be a lot of gasoline. The first big bar you see on the right side is gasoline. The value of all their exports are down 21%. The tonnage is up 11%. And imports is down 33% because we are actually importing less oil. You can see it on the other side when you look at the tonnage. So that in a nutshell is our website. Any questions about how to use the website? Again, it's ustradenumbers.com. You can look for any country, you look for any import, any export, most ports, most customs districts. Any other questions? Nope? One quick question, sir, and then we'll get to the panel. Sure. Elva's telling me I got to move it along.
Yeah, Steve Kreskoff in Durham. I'm a trade lawyer and a consultant. One problem I have with these statistics is, let's take trade with China, for example, and trade deficit with China, which I think is running around, and we're talking about trade in goods, 350 billion a year, something like that, higher than that. The problem I have is when you actually look at the trade, much of it is comprised of manufactured goods, like my iPhone, for example. And if you look at how the iPhone is put together, it is in fact assembled in China, but there's many of the components, and of course the design and so forth, are originating in the United States and other countries. So because of our trade laws, we consider that import, when it comes in from China, to be 100% of value Chinese, but it's not.
Correct.
It may be, the actual value added in China may be 10 or 15%. So we have, I know certain politicians have latched on to this. So it bothers me that there is a general misunderstanding that because of our country of origin marking laws and how we collect statistics, it's not accurately reflecting what's going on in this very complex world with complex supply chains and value chains.
For the first time a couple of years ago, more than 50, if you excluded oil at that time, oil and gasoline at that time, more than 50% of all the trade was actually component trade. It was not even just technology, it was apparel, it was a lot of things, it was for aviation. There was a whole lot of component trade where things were assembled from components brought from all over the world. It is true that that figure misrepresents. There's a number of anomalies in trade data. Any big data set, you're going to have a number of anomalies. So, correct, a lot of that trade is not actually Chinese trade. But again, to the point of the deficit and surplus, we actually have a surplus with far more countries than we have a deficit with. We have a very big deficit with a few countries. China's one, obviously. We have a big one with Canada, with Mexico, with Germany. But we have a surplus with many more countries than we have a deficit with. So if anybody wants to try to balance trade, make it balanced for some reason, there's going to be a whole lot of countries that the United States trades with, which will be happy to do that because we actually have a surplus with them. There's not a lot you can do about some of these, like I mentioned earlier that one of our leading exports was cell phones. We don't export, we don't manufacture cell phones here. So how can we export them? Even the cars, and we may talk about this a little bit later, cars when they're being produced cross the border time and time again. So there are some distortions in the data, but as a general rule, it gives you a very good idea of where goods move around the world. So is our deficit in cell phones overall probably as high as we say it is? It probably is, but attributing it all to China is probably not entirely fair, to your point, yeah. Any last questions before we bring the panel up? One more quick question? And then I promise we'll bring the panel up.
Why shouldn't we be concerned about the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States?
Why should we not be concerned about the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States? And you do hear a lot of that, about that during presidential campaigns in particular. I think some people say, let's bring all these manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Let's start making these cell phones here. Let's start making our iPhones here. Let's start making TVs here. Let's start making furniture here. A couple of reasons, and this is the point of my column in the publication. We currently have close to full employment in this country. And I think if you follow it to the logical extension, let's get everybody back into manufacturing these things that used to be manufactured here when I was younger. What's the next step? Take us all back to farmers? You know, where do we want to go? I think we want to go the other way. I think we want to let the world, as it is, manufacture for us the things that we don't necessarily need to manufacture, and we need to create the jobs that didn't exist a decade ago. There's a number of people in the room who are younger people, and I would be willing to bet there's a few of you have jobs currently that didn't exist 10 years ago. And a few of you will have jobs soon that didn't exist 10 years ago. There's all sorts of jobs being created in the new economy that what I think we need to focus on more is increasing education for people to create the jobs of the 21st century. So that's robotics, it's nanotechnology, it's 3D printing, it's social media type jobs. There's a ton of jobs that are going to be created that are going to be good, high-paying jobs. And I think we can allow the world. I mean, what's going on now with China is being, there's other countries that can now manufacture less expensively than China, right? And Vietnam is one of those, and that's why you see for the first time ever, Vietnam entered the top 20 as a U.S. trade partner. Vietnam is growing very, very fast. So I think, and by manufacturing, I would say, it's not that we don't need manufacturing jobs, we don't need the type of manufacturing jobs we once did here. There can be different types of manufacturing jobs. There are newer manufacturing jobs, high value, but robotics are going to change the number of people you need for manufacturing. So there's a lot of good reasons I think we should focus on. I mean, there's probably none of the younger people in this audience here would like to go work assembling cell phones, right? Anybody want to work assembling cell phones, right? Anybody want to be stitching clothing? I don't think so. Or, you know, shoes, whatever. So that's my view. One last question here. Let's keep saying one last question. We're going to keep you guys here till 3 in the afternoon.
Hi, I'm with the Dutch Embassy, and I have a question about what impact did you see in your data due to the devaluation of the yen last August?
Now that is a question for one of our panelists, I think. So that's a good segue, because I'm not an economist. I'm barely even a journalist. I'm just a guy who just knows how to look at data, but I'm sure that we can talk about currencies, right? So let's bring our panel up, and we'll let them run through quick presentations, and I promise you Milan will talk about the yen at some point, right? Okay.